FreeWheel actually as a global supporter of our events. They're a huge player in the television and the streaming industry, and we're delighted to have, let's give a massive round of applause for Mark McKee, who's the General Manager of FreeWheel Comcast. Mark.
Nice picture.
Welcome, mate.
How are you?
Okay.
Thank you.
You need that.
I do. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Justin, huge thanks to you, the team, and if this morning's dialogue or breakfast is anything to do with how the day's going to unfold, it's going to be amazing. So thank you. It's very excited to be here. This is my first time in Australia. Pretty amazing. From New York compared to Sydney, a much friendlier bunch, that is for sure. But I was coming over here thinking to myself, why did it take me so long? My two sisters spent a long period of time here. Two of the most influential mentors in my career are Australian. And so this is a long overdue visit to such an important market within the global media ecosystem. I'm also excited to announce that FreeWheel is launching in this region with several strategic partners. And so that too is overdue, just given, again, so important this market has become. So I'm going to talk a little bit about streaming, follow on Guy's presentation that was very Australian focused, which was great. I am not going to do that. I was heard, Justin said, talk about the ecosystem, what you're seeing, and how that can apply to some of the learnings that you might see take shape here or are already taking place here. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And just to give you a little bit of background on what FreeWheel is an advertising platform that is used by around 80% of the premium programmers, distributors, and broadcasters across the US and Europe. And so we come with a great understanding for what premium means and then how the digital giants are and streamers are taking shape in that very important ecosystem. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, obviously, everything goes with consumers. And when we think about that consumption pattern that Guy just spoke about in the US, and I think it's very important to understand that, people are still consuming content and consuming content greatly. But in 2025, 50% of that consumption will take place in CTV, shifting out of linear. And what's really important about that is from an investor perspective and an investments of advertising, so do those dollars. And so when we see where that shape, the good news is that the ad dollars in video are going up. The bad news is it is shifting out of linear into streaming, and there are much more competitions when you think about it. We talked about Amazon, we think about Netflix, we think about Google. And the thing that I find most interesting is that we don't follow the rules, we follow our own rules, and those rules tend to be very, very slow. And so why don't we take a page out of what the biggest digital giants and streaming companies have had for success? First, they make their own rules. They don't wait for traditional measurement to catch up and say, you know what, I'm going to follow that model. They create their own, and I know it's surprising, but they do really well on their own. Those results seem to be very, very positive. Two, they see the power of what TV does. And so globally, they're buying the live sports rights, as an example, and leveraging that in new and different ways. They're embracing advertising. Some of these platforms were never going to be ad-supported, and now they are embracing it with open arms. And then last, and certainly not least, they make it easy to spend a lot of money for marketers. And so we should be thinking about that as we think about that transition from broadcaster to streaming. And what we've often done is we're broadcasters first, streamers second. We have to shift that paradigm. We have to be streamers first and have a very strong foundation in broadcasting. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the 5 trends that I've seen play out in the US, globally, internationally, and see kind of how that translates to what you could do. All right, so the first one is embrace programmatic. Interestingly, in Australia, you've done a nice job of that. But what we've seen in the US, and certainly globally, 600% growth. Now, that's off a very low base. I understand that. And it's not so much that they're embracing programmatic. It's the fact that what it's unlocking for them. And I'll give one example. NFL program has around 34 advertisers in a given game. Those 34 advertisers translate to a lot of money, don't get me wrong. One programmer said, listen, I'm going to try to take a game, and I'm going to transition that into programmatic digital ad insertion, and went from 34 brands to over 200. And most of those brands never, ever ran on TV. The second thing is, as you dig into it, we hear in the US, they say 87% of CTV is transacted programmatically. As you dig into the premium programmatic folks, the biggest programmers and publishers, it's only 35%. 65% is still done in an I/O or an upfront fashion in the traditional sense. And if you dig in further, and you see, most of it is just automating the I/O. Not the greatest opportunity for competing more effectively with the digital giants. The second thing is, it is getting more complex. So you add programmatic into the mix, you need technology, you need automation to make it work. And right now, one piece of content, and this is true here too, can be consumed on over 400 endpoints or devices. Very, very complex. Now, when you have complexity, that's, you need technology to help solve that, no problem. But it also adds a lot of different players into the space. And so as we look at some of the programmatic transactions that take shape, what I find very interesting is that oftentimes, it's not uncommon, 40% of the dollars spent goes to ad tax, ad tolls in that programmatic transaction. And so as you think about it from a premium perspective, the opportunity to go direct is much, much, much stronger. You can put more working media in, more value into what you're doing between the buyer and the seller through those direct connections. But also, as you think about it, there's a lot of uncertainty that brands have and that you have. What I bought, did it run where I said it was going to run? In addition to that, it really gives you the opportunity to use automation technologies to start to look at new ways in which to measure the success or outcomes and results of your media. Now, with that comes the need for a lot more data. And data is one of the hot topics in the industry overall, and certainly global within every region. We have GDPR that is taking tremendous shape internationally and throughout Europe. But also we have new regulations coming out every day. The cookie is going away. IP address doesn't work anymore. And so what do? At the same time, we have a huge opportunity as streamers. Authenticated users. How do you take advantage and leverage those authenticated users to unlock new potentials, to compete more effectively, like we heard from Guy, like Amazon? And it's not just to do it and say, hey, we can target, we can measure better, but it's also how do you start to make your linear look like digital? Start to converge those pools of inventory because scale is so important. And so as we think about that, we have to think about how we do that at scale with partnerships. Now, there are a number of partnerships that have taken shape throughout all of Australia, no question about that. We've also had a lot of them throughout Europe and throughout the US. The problem with them all, they serve many masters, and they are slow, very, very slow. And so while they're good in the intent, while we're trying to figure out what the greatest plan is, new innovation is coming out of the streaming organization. So we have to stop looking for perfection and start to make progress. And if we do that effectively, one of the biggest things that we see time and time again is we are squarely positioned in the TV ecosystem at the top of that funnel. We do a great job of it. But as we think about connected TV, as we think about moving to a more digitally minded way of working and operating, we have the opportunity and the effectiveness to actually unlock the entire funnel. And so as we think about where we need to go next, this is something that we cannot overlook because we are not just top of the funnel players. And we heard from Guy, the growth of fast channels. I think the last thing that we must think about very, very importantly is the consumer. And what we've found time and time again with fast channels and the growth of that, it's very, very cumbersome ad experience. We even heard it on the panel this morning. Every advertiser says, yes, the ad experience is important, but then you fast forward and look and audit, how is that being delivered? Mid-rolls in CTV or FAST, longer than 3 minutes, that's not a great experience. Having 25% of fast channels not actually serve an ad and just see a slate, not a great experience. And we see this often, we're consumers first, so we know this has happened to us. Back-to-back ads, no management of frequency. And so as we think about what we want to do as an industry overall, it really comes down to these 5 things. We have to embrace programmatic, but do it in a way that is not just automating the I/O. Tap the power of direct connections. Do not let ad tax get in the way of the buyer and seller relationships and the value you create. Leverage your first-party data. Do it in a way that helps to converge all of your assets in video, but also, in addition to that, do it in a way that starts to bring the industry together to set standards and ways of working that make it easy to buy. And when you make it easy to buy, make sure you're getting credit for the full power of the results you're delivering, because you are not just the top of the funnel media or vehicle anymore. The full funnel is something that we can prove and we've seen work very effectively. And then finally, if you want to be successful, do not launch, and I know it's very attractive, to go into new channels, new ways of distributing your content. But if you do it with a distribute first, ad experience second, you will fail. And we see that time and time again, not just for your businesses, but also for the brands that run. So, and finally, as we think about this, and we think about this transformation, again, going from streaming companies with a great broadcaster foundation, you can't undermine the power that TV has brought, the scale that TV has brought. But there is something that's very, very important, which is how do you start to converge these two worlds in a much more meaningful way that can compete with the new entrants in this space. So with that, thank you so much, and I will be here all day as well. Thank you.
Mark, one quick question. Sure. The US has actually done a really good job of maintaining a strong linear business, right? I don't know if you guys know, but the declines of linear viewing is actually being outstripped by spend. So people are spending more than the actual declines in the US. That's not mirrored elsewhere. What have they done in the US in order to achieve that you haven't seen here in Australia?
Well, I think that programmatic story is a good one, which is they haven't shifted to more dynamic ways in which to transact. It's probably the biggest thing that they've done.
Yeah.
And they've protected their programming. It doesn't last for that long, though. So there are certainly new entrants that are coming to the space that are...
The streamers are, what you're referring to, they're after the sports rights.
For sure. And that's one of the single biggest ways in which to reach customers and for them drive subscriptions of their services.
And that's why we're seeing
And it works, by the way.
And that's why we're seeing the main, is it Disney, Discovery, and others joining forces in order to compete with sports rights. That's why you're seeing that, because they're trying to look after the linear business.
It's very expensive, as we all know. And so to do that, it's more about how do they merge their buying power to compete with the endless budgets that sit within the Amazons and Apples of the world.
Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big hand for Mark McKee. Come all the way here.
Thank you.
Joe, thanks, mate. He's around all day. Right. Next up, now I didn't mention this in my opening remarks because I thought I'd have this opportunity now, but we have a wonderful partnership with MI3. And obviously, many of you know Paul McIntyre and probably agree with this. I think he's one of the best journalists in the world on this particular topic. He's very punchy. He provides a lot of analysis. He's a real gem for the Australian market. So it's absolute pleasure to be able to work with him on this event. We sort of conceived this session together, but you put it together, didn't you, Paul? And the idea was to get the view of the marketer looking at how they're using internal attribution tools and measurement tools to understand where they put their money. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Paul and his panelists a massive round of applause to come on stage.